Hi, so this isn't going to be one of those videos where it's super polished and we've got nice edits and all that good stuff. What I'm trying to do here is explain and figure out, as I'm explaining, how private endpoints or private link can work with Azure Synapse Analytics. This is due to a customer question that I had recently. So I'm going to do this in one take, and there's going to be long pauses. I may get stuck because I frankly don't have much time to edit the video. So hopefully you'll stick around and we'll get it figured out, and the concept should be explained to you. So what I have is Synapse Analytics workspace. I've deployed this, and when I deployed it with what's called the managed VNET. So I just open it up here. I haven't locked this down in any way, shape or form, so I can access the Synapse Analytics workspace. I can do stuff, so all that good stuff. So if I look back to resource groups, we see that there's this Synapse managed. This is the resource group that contains the managed infrastructure. All we can see is the SQL Server and the SQL database. So private endpoints. What the customer wants to be able to do is access PaaS services from Synapse that are only exposed over private endpoints currently. So I've got a couple of examples here. So if I go to shared data services, and if I sort by type, we'll see that I've got a Cosmos DB account and I've got a Key Vault, and we see that we have the equivalent private endpoints. These private endpoints are exposed on this virtual network. So on this virtual network, I've got a workstation virtual machine, and there's a customer VNet, and there's two subnets, one virtual machines and one for private endpoints. So the virtual machine should be able to access both of those PaaS services over the private endpoints. What the customer wants to do now is to be able to access those services from Synapse. So let's try and attempt that now. So if I go back to home and go to resource groups, we see we've got our Synapse workspace here, and we're using the managed VNet, which I mentioned. So I'm not locking down Synapse to be accessed over the private endpoint. I can show you that in a minute, but the goal is to access these PaaS services, be the Vault and the Cosmos DB. So to do that, I believe the only way you can do that is if you're using a managed VNet is through Synapse itself. So to do that, I have to go into Synapse Studio, go into Manage down here, and we're going to manage to private endpoints. This is where Synapse seems to be a little bit different from most other PaaS services, which kind of threw me for a loop because I'm not a data cloud solution architect. So in order to access the Cosmos DB and that Vault, I need to configure it here. So I go into New Managed Endpoint, select Vault, hit Continue, and my private Vault. Remember, this Vault is already only exposed over a different private endpoint, which that workstation VM can access. So this private endpoint is to allow Synapse through the managed VNet access to this same Vault. So I'm going to pick my Sandbox subscription, and this is the Vault that I've created here. And if I hit create, it says it doesn't fully complete it. It creates a request because the owner of the Vault could be somebody different. So if I hit create, it initiates it on the Synapse side, but then I'll need to go in and approve that. So let's show how that works. And whilst that's provisioning, I'm also going to do the Cosmos DB one as well. I know when I created it with the SQL API. So I'm going to hit continue, and I'm going to hit Sandbox, and there's my Cosmos DB. Same thing will apply here. It will start provisioning on this side, but on the side of the data source, I need to go and approve that. So I'm going to do that now. So I'm going to flip back to the portal here, and I need to go into my resource groups, into shared data services, and sort by type again. So let's do the Cosmos DB first. And if I go to private endpoint connections, we can see we've got a pending connection here. So I need to click on that and approve and say, no problem. Hit yes. So this is updating it. So now once this is approved, it should be accessible through Synapse and also through this other endpoint which I previously created, which allows the workstation VM in my customer VNet access. So this Cosmos DB is fully private. It can be accessible by two places, through through Synapse and through my workstation VM. So if I refresh, that might take a minute or two. So whilst that's doing that, I'll do the vault as well. So if I go into Key Vault and go into networking and private, interesting, you can see how there's not great consistency between services. So within Cosmos DB, there was a private endpoint connection section, but here I have to go into networking and then private endpoint connections. Just something to be aware of. All these services are created by different teams, and I'm going to hit approve on this because it's pending and say again, no problem. So that's approving now. So let me go back to, this is pending. So this is in Synapse. Let me refresh. It does take a few minutes for this to create because it's basically creating a NIC within the managed virtual network. So whilst that is doing that, one thing I can show you as well is what I've just showed you a second ago was how Synapse connects to PaaS services. But Synapse itself, Synapse Studio, you can lock that down to be only accessible from a private endpoint. So at the moment, as you can see, I'm just on my home PC and I can access Synapse and add endpoints and do all of the administrative things. A lot of customers would like to not allow that to happen and lock that down to specific workstations. So again, if I go back to resource groups and go into customer infra, I have a workstation VM and that lives in the customer VNet. So I want to lock down Synapse to be only accessible via this workstation VM, Synapse Studio. So to do that, I need to go into Synapse and I need to add a resource. And I'm going to add Synapse, different ways of. So there's this thing called Azure Synapse Analytics Private Link Hubs. I'm going to create this. It doesn't ask me a lot of information. I'm just going to put Synapse PL Hub. Perfect. And I'm going to put that in West Europe. And I'm going to create that. Hopefully that won't take too long. Whilst that's doing that, let's go back here again. We can see this is nearly done. The vault is already done. It says that it's yeah, we might need to wait a minute more. The vault is done. So the vault now can be accessed from my workstation VM and only through Synapse. Hope that makes sense. The fact, because this is a managed virtual network in a managed resource group, I don't believe you can see these connections. Let's double check on that now. So you know the way that you know it exists is through here, but I don't know if you can see that through the portal. Let's double check. So if I go into Synapse Managed and hit Show Hidden Types, yeah, I can't see it. So you need to take it for granted that the only way is through here. So whilst we're doing this, and whilst the private link hub is being created, let me just double check on the Cosmos DB private endpoint connection. This one, this is still pending. Let me try and approve again. So I am trying to do 3 things at once. So let me go back now to the private link hubs. This is confusing, I know. Stay with me. Right, so the private link hubs is created. So if I open up this, I can create private endpoint connections. I think I need to create a few of these. So I'm going to create them all in the same resource group. One is called SQL, I believe. You can call it whatever you like, but it's referring to this sub-resource, which is private link hubs. So Microsoft.synapse private link hubs. And it's the Synapse PL hub. And it's the web. So actually I'm going to rename that back to web. I want to get the naming convention correct. Perfect. That's fine. And I want this accessible, remember, through this customer VNet, and I'm going to put the private endpoints all in this subnet. So now with this, it should allow my workstation VM access. So I'm going to integrate with a private DNS zone, which is cool. I'm just going to put it there as well, and I will hit create. So now that's being created. Let me go back here, refresh this, and we're all approved. So we've done one thing. I've showed you how to access data services that already exist through private endpoints for Synapse with a customer, with a managed VNet, managed resources. So the next thing I want to show again is, at the moment, if I go back here to resource groups, and then again to Synapse, and I want to look at the configuration of this, the workspace, and if I go into firewalls, we can see that we're allowing access to everything, but we don't have private endpoints yet as well. We've got the one for the hub, but to get this fully locked down to the customer VNet, I need to add 3 private endpoints here, and then I will need to disallow this allow all rule. So I'm going to do the private endpoints first. I'm going to create the first one, and that is SQL, I believe. Again, you can call it whatever you like. I like to match the name of the sub resource. So if I go to Microsoft.synapse workspaces, pick your workspace, and now it's asking for the sub resource. I'm going to create one for each of these. So the first one I'm doing is SQL, and again I'm going to put it here in this private endpoints thing, and I am going to put this here. Create, and I'm going to go in again and do the next one while it's doing that. So private endpoint connections, and then I'm going to do private endpoint, and one's called Dev West Europe, and again Microsoft.synapse/workspaces. Pick your workspace, pick your sub resource. I'm doing dev now, and again very similar. I'm going to go to private endpoints, and I'm going to integrate with the private DNS zone. I'm going to create, and the last one is SQL on demand. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to do the last one here, which is SQL on demand. West Europe is cool as well. Again, Microsoft.synapse/workspaces. Building Azure is the name of my workspace. This is my sub resource. Again, private endpoints, going to use that private DNS zone, already exists. Review and create. So my 3 private endpoint connections are being created now. I can actually see them there already, which is cool. So let me go back into the workspace. We're going to private endpoint connections. We can see they're already approved, all of that good stuff. So I can still access Synapse by going into Studio, and I can do things. If I go to new SQL script, there's no errors that pop up here, but let me remove the firewall rule now. Remember, I'm accessing this from my home PC, so it's just any public. I'll fall under this rule here, but I'm going to remove this rule, which is going to stop me from accessing it, and hit save. Bear in mind, I'm doing quite a few things, so I will need to wait for these to complete. Okay, so that rule has been removed now. So if I try and open up the Synapse workspace again, just close down all these other tabs first. Cancel that. Leave. Okay, so open up Synapse Studio again. So interesting, it doesn't prevent me from seeing this page or anything like that, but it seems to just prevent me from doing stuff. So if I go to new SQL script, we see I've got an internal error now. I can't access this serverless SQL pool. And if I go into things like private endpoints, I can't see the private endpoints. I know they're there, we saw them before. It's because I'm being blocked now by the firewall. So in order to access this now, I need to go in through my workstation VM. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to close this, and I'll pause the video and come back once I'm inside the workstation VM because it's in a different window. Okay, so this screen you see in front of you is actually a browser on the workstation VM that we spoke about. So this one has access to Synapse over those private endpoints that we just created. And I can show you that by hitting open Synapse Studio. Remember, in the previous example from my own machine from the browser, I wasn't able to create a new SQL script or look at the private endpoints. But from this VM, I can see if I go to new SQL script, after I accept the cookies, of course. So we see I don't get that error that I was getting from my own machine. And if I go into manage and go into manage private endpoints, we can see that I can see the endpoints from this VM. So I think that concludes what I was trying to show. Number one was how to access PaaS services, data services that Synapse uses, and that's through creating private endpoints through Synapse Studio and then approving them on the data service side. And the next thing I showed you was how to lock down Synapse Studio itself from certain VNets, etc. So I hope that makes sense. Synapse is a little bit different when it comes to private endpoints, given that you have this managed VNet concept, and the only way you appear to be able to create them is through this user interface, which confused me a little bit. So I'm hoping this video was useful to people, as it was useful if it existed before I tried to figure all of this out. And that's it. Thank you.